From lowliest of marauders to mightiest of bloodthirsters, Khorne's horde has a very wide selection of units, all devoted to the single purpose of rushing into melee and ending their enemy's existence as quickly as possible. I'm Khorne, and today I will be providing you with a detailed guide on which Khorne units you should be recruiting in your single player campaigns and what kinds of armies you should build with them. But before we begin, we first have to understand what kinds of tactics you use and how you win battles when playing as Khorne, which can all basically be summarized by get stuck into melee and just kill everything. Quite simple, really. So now that we got the very basics of what every Khorne faction is good at out of the way, let's rank his units based off of that. As per usual, I will be ranking these units into 5 different categories. Doomstack worthy, where these units are ridiculously strong and can be made unstoppable. Bread and butter, these units are the units you should have as the backbone of your armies. Situational units, units that aren't meant for every situation, but can be very useful in certain situations and against certain enemies. Expendable trash, these units are there just to die and buy your other units time to dish out damage. And actual trash, where I would just recommend you not recruit these units. Now, I just want to mention that this is a tier list for when recruiting your units, not when you get them for free in your blood hosts. As it is very different getting units for free, who will die after a while anyways, and recruiting units that should last you for the majority of your campaign. So, to start off with, let's take a look at our melee infantry. First up are our 2 variants of Marauders, which both go into the expendable trash category. Nothing surprising there. They are cheap and can be useful early on. However, I would advise you only recruit them in the early stages of a campaign when you are in dire need of units and have no money to recruit the Chaos Warriors. And this is mostly because you're able to get Chaos Warriors from your settlement buildings much sooner than getting Marauders from the military building. And Chaos Warriors are infinitely better than Marauders. The only problem is they're a bit more expensive as well. Then we have the newest addition, the Khorne Gores, which I will say are situational at best, complete trash at worst. They are barely any better than your Marauders and are only ever going to be good when hunting down enemy cavalry, which isn't that big of a priority in battles. And if you just need some fast units to reach the enemy back line, literally any other fast unit will outperform them. Next we have Bloodletters and Exalted Bloodletters. Both of these go into the bread and butter units. Amazing killing power with decent speed to get into melee as quickly as possible. You can get the regular version early on and then just swap them out for the Exalted version later. Now onto all of the Chaos Warrior variants, and they all go into the bread and butter category as well. Doesn't really matter which variant you choose, they all have a role to play on the battlefield and they all do a really good job at it. The Forsaken, however, I'm not really a big fan of. They don't really have that much armor-piercing damage, and being fast with armor isn't that big of a deal. So I will place them as situational if you want them to run down enemy range units, but I would recommend you get some much faster units with more killing power. Now onto all of our elite infantry units, and let's start out with the Chosen. The regular version will be going into the bread and butter category, while the dual-wielding version into Doomstack tier. Chosen of Khorne dual weapons are a ridiculous unit to have in melee. They are able to cut through any enemy with relative ease, while also being decently tanky and only taking 1 turn to recruit. And the base version of Chosen are pretty good at holding the line, but they kind of lack any real killing power. Finally, when it comes to the rest of the newest additions to the roster, Skull Reapers I will put into the bread and butter category, while Wrathmongers go into the Doomstack category. The Skull Reapers don't really have much going for them. They're good in melee, but barely any better than melee units in the same tier, and they're fine if you want magic attack while also not wanting any demonic units, but aside from that, not really much point. Wrathmongers, however, just refuse to take any damage when in melee. Their damage output can vary, but they just don't care about enemy units that are engaging them. More than likely because of their immunity to flanking in combination with their splash attacks. Combine all of this with the fact they are a tier 4 unit you can recruit in 1 turn, makes them absolutely amazing for your late game armies. Moving on to our Cavalry and Chariots, and there is only 1 unit here that goes into the trash category, and that is the Chaos Chariots. Just an awful unit to get in my opinion, as it has very little killing potential and is very vulnerable to taking damage. Then when it comes to Chaos Knights and Gore Beast Chariots, they all go into your bread and butter category. Just amazing survivability with insane killing power, and are perfect for either hammer into anvil tactics or hunting down enemy range units. Now, as for the Blood Crushers, I am a bit unsure where to place them. I honestly think they don't perform as well as Skull Crushers, but they do perform better than Chaos Knights. Their biggest problem is the fact they're a tier 5 unit in the building chain that offers you nothing good. I mean, it's just horrible to get to them. I will place them as situationally good if you want to build a demon-focused army, but I would honestly just get some other demonic units instead. As for Skull Crushers, I think they are a Doomstack worthy unit. Absolutely insane damage on their charges. Whether you're charging against infantry or large units, it matters not to them. They are just absolutely amazing on the battlefield. Big group of units coming up, your Missile Cavalry, which is just gonna be the Marauder Horsemen. I will put them as situational units at best. They are good and their range attacks can help, but I would never really get them after the early stages of your campaign, and would just swap them out for something better later on. Next we have artillery and war machines, the blood shrines and the skull cannons, and both of them will go into the trash category. I would honestly never recommend you recruit these units, as they are at best a tier 2 unit, but you need to build a tier 3 building that provides you with nothing aside from the blood shrine, and then you have to upgrade it to tier 4 to be able to get the skull cannon. I know these are good units, but they are so awful to recruit, and you can get so much better units at that tier that can do a much better job on the battlefield. If you were able to recruit these at a lower tier, I would definitely have placed them as situational, but considering how hard it is to get them, they are just trash. Finally, we come to our Monstrous units. First off are the Warhounds, which I will place as situationally good. A decent unit for the early game when you don't have access to any fast units with more killing power. Furies are much better than they used to be, so I will place them as situational as well, but a lot less useful than the Warhounds. And they do have a habit of dying instantly, so I would be very careful when using them. Now for the Khorne dogs, the Bloodhounds of Khorne, I will place them as trash. I'm not sure why, maybe because they are large, but they honestly always just underperform and fail to both dish out damage when engaged in melee, or when it comes to running down enemy fleeing units. So I would just advise you avoid recruiting them. Then come the Monstrous infantry. First up are Chaos Spawn, and they go into the trash tier. If you have access to something like Minotaurs, Chaos Spawn just look like an absolute joke, so I would recommend you not recruit them. Then we have the new Blood Beasts that go into the situational category. While they aren't that amazing, they have decent speed and good killing power, so you can definitely use them, but the reason they aren't any higher up is because of something like Minotaurs. And finally, Minotaurs are Doomstack tier. With decent speed, amazing killing power, high defenses, and a technology you can research that allows them to heal. This is an absolutely insane unit to get. Just amazing on all accounts. Now come all of these single entities. The Chaos War Shrines are gonna go into the trash category. They are a big, low mobility target that the AI loves to shoot. It provides a decent AoE buff, but it really isn't essential for your army. And you can always get a cultist on a War Shrine mount, so really this unit is completely redundant. Then come the Soul Grinders, and while I'm not the biggest fan of them, they can work, so I will place them as Doomstack worthy. Then we have the Bloodthirsters, and this is definitely a Doomstack worthy unit. Can fly, has decent defensive stats, and absolutely demolishes anything it comes into contact with. Their only issue is that you can't heal them, but if you have a Exalted Bloodthirster leading them, you can give them Barrier, which will definitely help them prevent some damage. Finally, the newest big bad monster on the battlefield, emphasis on the bad, the Slaughter Brute. Now, I have tried this unit out quite a bit, but I always come to the same conclusion. They are just rather not so great. They are a big target that is very susceptible to taking damage, while also not being that great at dishing out damage. The best way to use them is to cycle charge them constantly into melee, as they have a attack animation that works just like a chariot charge, so you can't just use them to plow through enemy infantry. In the end, I will place them as situational if you just want to diversify your armies, as it isn't really horrible if you can use it correctly, but it also isn't great either. Now, when it comes to your lords, there really isn't much to say other than that the Mortal Chaos Lords are probably the weakest option. And I wouldn't recommend you get them, even if you just wanted a Demon Prince, as Demon Princes of Khorne aren't great either. After the update, the Exalted Bloodthirsters are an absolutely amazing lord option to get, with amazing buffs for demonic units and being even better in melee now than before. Now, in order to get a Exalted Bloodthirster, you will first have to get a Herald who will ascend over time. And I would definitely recommend you ascend them. Heralds aren't a bad lord option, but they aren't really amazing either. As for Blood Speakers, they're really good lords to lead your armies. They provide some amazing buffs to every unit in their army, while also providing some more buffs and debuffs on the battlefield. When it comes to your heroes, you should always have at least one cultist and at least one Blood Reaper in your armies. Exalted heroes are good, and while you can't put one in every army, I think it would be better if you were to put multiple of them in a single army, which you're going to be using to fight enemies with lots of large monsters, like for example the Lizardmen, as they are very powerful melee combatants and are your most reliable way of killing large targets. Alright, finally we come to the army compositions part of the video, and well, there isn't much to say here. You have melee infantry and you have fast-moving melee units. Pretty straightforward. The majority of your armies should consist of infantry, say something like 10 to 15 units, and the rest of it should be fast-moving units such as cavalry or monstrous infantry to flank the enemy. In the beginning, this should start out as something like Warriors of Khorne with Warhounds or Marauder Horsemen, while in the later stages of the game, an ideal army composition would be, say, 13 Chosen, with a Blood Speaker, a Cultist, a Blood Reaper, and 5 Chaos Knights. Or Gorby's Chariots, those work fine. Don't forget to also always specialize your armies to the enemy they will be fighting, so for example, if you're gonna be fighting versus Ogres, bring lots of Halberds. While for fighting dwarfs, bring lots of dual weapons. In the beginning of your campaign, however, you will mostly be limited to recruiting the very base version of the Chaos Warriors and the Bloodletters. Now, most people do say they have an issue with Bloodletters being extremely easy to kill, but it's probably because they just send them into melee head first. And while Khorne does approve, ideally you would recruit some Chaos Warriors alongside your Bloodletters and have the Chaos Warriors take the brunt of a missile volley or enemy charge, and only then back them up with your Bloodletters. You can also use your Bloodletters as a flanking unit, but definitely not a unit that will get stuck into melee first, unless you have no other choice in the matter, like for example in a Bloodhost. Now, while we're also on the topic of Bloodletters, I usually don't get too many of them in my late game armies, as the Exalted version takes a lot longer to recruit than Chosen or Wrathmongers. But if you really want some Exalted Bloodletters in your armies, I would say have half the infantry just be something like regular Chosen to hold the line, while the rest of your army be Bloodletters that will just absolutely kill the enemy. Then, in the end, we have the Doomstacks. And there isn't really much to say here, but there are a few really good ones. First of which are Bloodthirsters for Skarbrand, or Bloodthirsters in general, but Skarbrand now has his unique trait, provide Bloodthirsters and Soul Grinders with Gore Feast, which makes them heal while in melee. This just makes them absolutely unstoppable. Then we have the newest addition, Wrathmongers, who completely refuse to take damage from the enemy. Pair them up with a Blood Speaker who provides them with some extra speed and damage, and they become unstoppable. Best part is, they are quick and easy to recruit as well. Then one of my favorite Doomstacks, the Minotaurs of Khorne. In your technology tree, you will find something labeled as Blood Snorting, don't ask, which gives them all healing based on the number of enemy units they've killed in melee. Suffice to say, this makes them absolutely unkillable on the battlefield, all while dishing out insane damage. Finally, we have the Skull Crushers. Not the best Doomstack, but if you put them in a Blood Speaker's army and research all of their corresponding technologies, a Doomstack of them can definitely be good, but I wouldn't really recommend getting a spam army of them. And that would be pretty much everything I had to share with you guys on this topic. If you enjoyed the video and would like to watch more, don't forget to subscribe for future content. Thank you all for watching, and until next time.
Khorne fights as one.